How adaptable is an 18th century operating manual for a 21st century superpower? It's a huge question, right? And one we're diving deep into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack complex ideas, distill them, and deliver those aha moments straight to you.
Exactly. And today, our mission is to explore Dr. Ryan Baidya's One Person, One Vote, Ending Gerrymandering Forever. It's chapter 22 of his book, A New Constitution, A New America.
And the central question we're really grappling with here, the one that gets right to the heart of this deep dive, is this. How can a governing document from 1787, born of very specific compromises for an agrarian post-colonial nation, how can it possibly serve the needs of this incredibly complex, diverse, high-tech nation of over 340 million people in 2025? It almost feels like asking a horse and buggy to navigate, the global internet.
That's a great analogy. It really captures the tension, doesn't it? So we'll start by looking at how that 1787 framework is seen as being under strain today. Then we'll dive into a pretty radical proposed 21st century model for federal representation, presidential elections, the works.
Radical, you say?
Okay.
Intriguing.
Oh, yeah. And finally, we'll discuss the profound benefits, but also the immense challenges of a system like that.
Right. So to really get why people feel they're strained today, we kind of have to rewind, don't we? Back to 1787. What was that world like? What were the framers actually trying to solve back then?
Well, think about it. 1787, you've got just 13 colonies, basically brand new independence, and they are deeply wary of any strong central power. Remember the Articles of Confederation?
Total mess, right?
Pretty much. They were dealing with big arguments between states about trade, trying to hold together this really fragile union. So the compromises they made in the Constitution, they were very practical fixes for that specific moment in time.
The things like the Great Compromise, giving every state 2 senators, no matter how big or small, or the Electoral College for picking the president. These weren't just like philosophical debates.
Not at all. They were trying to soothe very real political anxieties to keep the new nation from falling apart.
What kind of anxieties specifically?
Well, you had big states wanting representation based on population. Makes sense. But the small states were terrified of being completely ignored, right?
Okay, yeah.
And the Electoral College, that was a complicated beast. Part of it was concern about a large, potentially uninformed public directly electing a president. But it also helped balance power between states, especially considering the difficult issue of slavery and how populations were counted then. These were deals made to get the thing ratified.
Gotcha. Okay, fast forward to 2025. It's just a completely different planet almost.
Absolutely. A vast, diverse, globally interconnected superpower. And we're facing challenges the founders couldn't even have dreamed of.
Like what?
Oh, a globalized economy, AI, biotech moving at lightning speed, climate change, nuclear weapons, global pandemics.
Not to mention huge shifts in civil rights and this intense political polarization we see everywhere, amplified by 247 media.
Exactly. And the source material points out something interesting. That old fear, the one that drove those 1787, compromises the fear of states just packing up and leaving the union that's mostly gone.
Yeah, that feels less likely now.
Instead, the anxiety today is more about whether the federal government itself actually works. Is it functional? Is it truly representative?
So that shift really brings the core question into focus, doesn't it? Can that 1787 rulebook, designed for maybe 4 million people in a farming society, really work for 340 million plus in our world?
And many argue, while the principles of liberty in the Constitution are timeless, the structures themselves are showing serious signs of strain.
You hear that phrase, the dead horse theory, like stop putting effort into something that's fundamentally outdated.
It echoes Thomas Jefferson, actually. He felt every generation should revisit and, if needed, renew its constitution. It's a powerful idea that definitely informs this whole discussion.
So this strain, it shows up as political gridlock, right? Unequal representation, people feeling like the government isn't listening.
Precisely. A growing disconnect between public will and government action.
Okay, so let's dig into those specific perceived problems with the 1787 framework today. One big issue isn't just the design itself, but how incredibly hard it is to change it, right? Article V.
You hit it. The amendment process is designed to be tough. Supermajorities needed in Congress, then ratification by 3/4 of the states.
Wow.
With today's deep partisan divides, making any meaningful structural change is almost impossible, even when lots of people agree there's a problem, that rigidity is a major factor.
Which brings us right to the Senate, that unequal representation. It's a direct result of that great compromise back in 1787.
Yep.
I mean, the numbers are just staggering when you think about it. Wyoming has what, about 500,000 people?
Right. Yeah.
And California has nearly 40 million. Yet they both get exactly 2 senators.
That's the system.
What does that do in practice? When such a small percentage of the population has the same voting power in the Senate as almost 40 million people?
Well, the practical impact is huge. It means a minority of the national population living in those smaller states can wield disproportionate power in half of Congress.
So they can block laws.
They can block legislation that a majority of Americans might actually support. Think about big national issues, climate action, gun control, even approving judges. It can lead to real gridlock and a feeling that the system isn't responsive.
Okay, and then there's the big one, the Electoral College. Choosing the president. We've seen it happen, what, 5 times now?
5 times where the person who got fewer individual votes nationwide still won the presidency. 1824, 1876, 1888, 2000, 2016.
Which for some people raises serious questions about legitimacy, right?
It certainly does for many. And beyond legitimacy, it massively shapes how presidential campaigns are run.
How so?
Candidates pour almost all their time and money into just a handful of swing states, the ones that could go either way.
So voters in safe states, whether reliably Democrat or Republican, basically get ignored.
Pretty much. Their votes are seen as locked in, so why spend resources there? It undermines the idea of a truly national campaign appealing to everyone.
And shifting to the House of Representatives, the power to draw the district lines, the maps, that mostly falls to state legislatures, doesn't it?
Largely, yes. And that's where gerrymandering comes in. Partisan gerrymandering.
Explain that. How does it work and what's the impact?
Basically, the party in power in a state legislature draws the congressional district maps to benefit themselves. They manipulate the boundaries, packing opponents' voters into a few districts, or spreading their own voters out efficiently to win more seats.
Creating safe seats where the election is basically decided in the primary.
Exactly. It leads to fewer competitive general elections, which pushes politicians to appeal more to their party's base, increasing polarization, accountability goes down.
You get those crazy-looking districts on the map, right? Squiggles that don't seem to represent any real community.
Yeah. Bizarre shapes designed purely for political advantage, not to group together communities with shared interests. It's like politicians choosing their voters instead of the other way around.
So if you put all these pieces together, the Senate imbalance, the Electoral College quirks, gerrymandering in the House, the difficulty of amending anything, what's the overall picture?
Well, critics argue it adds up to a system prone to gridlock. It struggles to pass timely, effective laws on really critical, complex issues. Think about healthcare costs, or how to regulate new tech like AI, or tackling economic inequality. The structure itself can get in the way of finding broadly supported solutions.
That paints a really clear picture of the strain. But you mentioned this deep dive also looks at a radical alternative, a thought experiment, the source calls it.
Yes, a proposed 21st century model, designed completely from scratch, really, to prioritize equal population representation and make every vote count directly.
Okay, I'm listening. How would that even work?
It imagines getting rid of the state-centric system we have now, at least for federal representation. Instead, it proposes a national grid system.
A grid, like literally drawing squares on the map.
Pretty much, dividing the entire contiguous U.S. into perfectly measured, uniform geographical units, squares, probably. Then these grids are counted systematically, say, starting in the northeast corner and moving across and down.
Why the grid? What does that achieve?
It creates a completely neutral, objective way to draw electoral boundaries. No human bias, no political fiddling, just math and geography.
Okay, so how do you get congressional districts out of these grid squares?
You'd combine adjacent grid squares following that strict numerical counting order until you hit a target population number. The proposal suggests maybe around 1 million citizens or voters per district.
Which would give you how many seats?
Somewhere around 345 seats in the House based on current population.
And the key thing here is these districts would cross state lines.
Absolutely. Whatever the grid lines and population counts dictate. The priority is population equality, not respecting state borders for federal elections. So you might get a district called, I don't know, Southwest Iowa and Northeast Nebraska, or Northern Delaware and Southern New Jersey.
Wow. Okay. And what about the Senate in this model? Does it even exist?
It does, but it's also based on the grid system. Senatorial districts would be formed by grouping together a set number of these new congressional districts, maybe 5 CDs per senatorial area.
So bigger areas, still crossing state lines, still based purely on population.
Exactly. You'd end up with maybe 68 to 70 senators, each representing a large chunk of the nation with roughly equal populations, not representing individual states anymore.
You said this grid system kills gerrymandering. Walk me through why it's so effective compared to, say, independent commissions drawing lines now.
Well, gerrymandering works because political actors get to draw arbitrary lines to their advantage. The grid removes that power entirely because the lines aren't drawn by people anymore. They're predetermined by the grid squares and the systematic counting method. It's an algorithm. The shape of a district is purely a result of geography and population density within those preset squares. There's nothing for politicians to manipulate.
So it forces competitive districts because the lines aren't rigged.
Precisely. It achieves precise population parity. Every vote carries almost exactly the same weight no matter where you live.
Which really leans into that one person, one vote idea.
Really. And it arguably makes representatives more accountable to the actual citizens in their grid area, rather than being tied primarily to state party structures or state interests.
Okay, that's the legislative branch. What about the president in this model? Direct popular vote.
Yes, direct national popular vote. Whoever gets the most votes wins the presidency. Simple as that, eliminates the popular vote loser scenario.
But you mentioned a twist, something about non-voters.
Right. There's a proposed double threshold for winning. A candidate needs to win a majority over 50% of the actual votes cast.
Okay, standard majority.
And they need to get at least one more vote than the total number of none of the above, or no-to votes.
Whoa, none of the above. How does that work?
Here's the really novel part. The proposal suggests that every registered voter who doesn't vote in the presidential election automatically has their non-vote counted towards this no-to tally.
So not voting isn't just apathy. It's counted as a vote against the offered candidates.
In a way, yes. It's meant to measure collective dissatisfaction. The idea is that to win, you don't just need more votes than your opponent. You need to demonstrate a mandate strong enough to overcome voter indifference or rejection of the choices.
What's the goal of that? Seems complicated.
The rationale is, first, to absolutely ensure the popular vote winner wins. Second, that high threshold forces candidates to genuinely try and appeal to everyone, not just their base or swing voters. And third, maybe it incentivizes more people to vote because choosing not to vote actually has a direct impact on the outcome's legitimacy.
This whole model, it fundamentally rethinks representation, doesn't it? Away from being a citizen of, say, Ohio to being a citizen of Grid Block 7B.
It's a radical shift, absolutely, from a union of states represented federally to a more direct representation of the national population divided numerically.
What's really compelling about it, though?
It's the directness. It doesn't just tweak the edges of gerrymandering or the Electoral College. It goes right to the root and redesigns the system for absolute numerical equality. One person, one vote, applied rigorously nationwide. It's bold.
Okay, let's analyze this. The benefits seem pretty clear, right? Getting rid of gerrymandering, making every vote equal in House and Senate races, ensuring the popular vote winner becomes president.
Yeah, the potential upsides in terms of fairness and representativeness, at least numerically, are pretty compelling. It tackles those major perceived deficiencies head on.
But you also used the phrase constitutional revolution earlier. The challenges must be enormous.
Understatement of the year, probably. Think about what this requires. You're eliminating state-based representation in the Senate, a cornerstone of the original Constitution.
Right, the great compromise goes out the window.
Completely. House districts crossing state lines fundamentally alters federalism, replacing the Electoral College. These aren't small changes. Getting these through the current Article V amendment process.
Forget about it.
Realistically, yes, it's virtually impossible. You'd need a political and social upheaval on the scale of the nation's founding, or maybe the Civil War, to even get to a point where a new constitutional convention discussing this kind of overhaul could happen.
And just the practical stuff, making sure every eligible voter is registered. The proposal mentions automatic registration through the DMV, phone companies, the IRS.
Which are interesting ideas, but accurately tracking every single registered voter nationwide, especially for that note account, which includes people who don't show up. That's a massive logistical undertaking. Data privacy concerns, administrative hurdles. It's huge.
And what about that high threshold for president? Majority plus beating the note account.
It's designed to ensure a strong mandate, yes. But what if no candidate clears that bar? A large no to count, which seems possible given current disillusionment, could lead to failed elections, maybe constitutional crises if there's no clear winner repeatedly. It's a risk.
Looking bigger picture again, what does this do to the idea of states? State identity, state power?
It massively diminishes the role of states in the federal structure. States would still exist, obviously, handle state issues, but their unique identity and power derived from federal representation. Gone.
You can imagine the opposition to that.
Fierce, probably insurmountable. From state governments who lose power, from citizens who strongly identify with their state and believe in state sovereignty as, fundamental to the American system. It shifts the U.S. much closer to a unitary national system, away from federalism.
One last potential downside. Those grid lines. They're neutral, okay, but could they accidentally break up real communities?
That's a definite concern. While it stops partisan gerrymandering, the rigid grid might slice right through existing communities of interest.
What do you mean by that?
Groups of people linked by, say, shared economic activity, cultural ties, maybe specific ethnic or demographic concentrations. A grid line could arbitrarily divide them across two or more districts, weakening their collective voice and making it harder to elect someone who understands their specific local needs.
So wrapping this up, we're left wrestling with this fundamental tension, aren't we? An 18th century structure facing 21st century realities.
Exactly. The problems we talked about, the Senate imbalance, the Electoral College outcomes, gerrymandering, they highlight where that old framework can produce results that feel, well, undemocratic or just plain dysfunctional today.
And this new model, this grid system, it's probably not happening anytime soon, realistically.
Almost certainly not in its proposed form.
But its value might be in forcing us to think about what kind of changes might be needed to truly live up to one person, one vote. It's a stark illustration.
It absolutely is. Even if the model itself faces huge, maybe deal-breaking challenges constitutionally and practically, it forces a confrontation with deep questions about what we value most in our democracy.
Which leaves a really important question for you, the listener, to think about. What should our governance prioritize? Those historical compromises, rooted in state identity and sovereignty? Or should it prioritize a more direct, numerically equal representation of every single citizen across the nation? What do you think is the most critical conversation we need to have about the future of American democracy? Something to chew on. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.